All right, folks. I want to start with just, we're going to be taking a look at Balak. Now, I know that you guys are familiar with Balak and Balaam, and I will switch to my slides just periodically as I'm reading so that you can see which translation I'm reading from if you want to, but then I'll turn it off from that so that we can discuss. So I'll go ahead and share the reading. I want to read most of chapter 22 to you. So we're going to be in the book of Numbers, chapter 22. Angela, my notes I seem to have misplaced. Can you check my... you can take this with you. I think maybe I took it to my room. Sorry. Okay, so I am going to read this for you. It is a decent chunk of Numbers chapter 22 regarding Balaam and Balak. And this is super important stuff, and it's also fascinating. There's a lot of prophecy stuff in here, and we're gonna have a discussion about it. I'm gonna share some thoughts and some ideas, and I hope that you will be able to share some thoughts and ideas as well. This is some challenging and a little bit mysterious sections of the scripture. When you're dealing with prophecy, it always is, but and also just the nature of Balaam himself and his relationship with God is also challenging. What's that?
Is this on?
It is. Okay. So beginning at Numbers 22, starting right at the beginning, it says, "Then the sons of Israel journeyed and camped in the plains of Moab, beyond the Jordan, opposite the city of Jericho. Now Balak, the son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. So Moab was in great fear because of the people, for they were numerous, and Moab was in dread of the sons of Israel. And Moab said to the elders of Midian, 'Now this horde will look up all that is around us, as the ox licks up the grass of the field.' And Balak, the son of Zippor, was king of Moab at that time. So he sent messengers to Balaam, the son of Beor, at Pethor, which is near the river, it's probably the Euphrates, in the land of the sons of his people, to call him, saying, 'Behold, a people came out of Egypt. Behold, they cover the surface of the land, and they are living opposite me. Now therefore, please come, curse this people for me, since they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I may be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed.' So the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the fees for divination in their hand, and they came to Balaam and repeated Balak's words to him. And he said to them, 'Spend the night here, and I will bring word back to you as Jehovah may speak to me.' And the leaders of Moab stayed with Balaam. Then God came to Balaam and said, 'Who are these men with you?' And Balaam said to God, 'Balak, the son of Zippor, the king of Moab, has sent word to me, saying, Behold, there is a people who came out of Egypt, and they cover the surface of the land. Now come, curse them for me. Perhaps I may be able to fight against them and drive them out.' And God said to Balaam, 'Do not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed.' So Balaam rose in the morning and said to Balak's leaders, 'Go back to your land, for Jehovah has refused to let me go with you.' The leaders of Moab arose and went back to Balak and said, 'Balaam refused to come with us.' Then Balak again sent leaders more numerous and more distinguished than the former ones. And they came to Balaam and said to him, 'This is what the king Balak the son of Zippor said. Let nothing, I beg you, hinder you from coming to me. For I will indeed honor you richly, and I will do whatever you say to me. Please, come then, curse this people for me.' Balaam replied to the servants of Balak, 'Though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not do anything, either great or small, contrary to the command of Jehovah my God. Now please, You also stay here tonight, and I will find out what else Yehovah will speak to me. And God came to Balaam at night and said to him, If the men have come to call you, rise up and go with them, but only the word which I speak to you shall you do. So Balaam arose in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the leaders of Moab. But God was angry because he was going, and the angel of Yehovah took his stand in the way as an adversary against him. Now he was riding on his donkey, and his 2 servants were with him. When the donkey saw the angel of Yehovah standing in the way with his sword drawn in his hand, the donkey turned off from the way and went into the field. But Balaam struck the donkey to turn her back into the way. Then the angel of Yehovah stood in a narrow path of the vineyards with a wall on this side and a wall on that side. When the donkey saw the angel of Yehovah, she pressed herself to the wall and pressed Balaam's foot against the wall, so he struck her again. The angel of Yehovah went further and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn to the right or to the left. When the donkey saw the angel of Yehovah, she lay down under Balaam. So Balaam was angry and struck the donkey with his stick. And Yehovah opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to Balaam, What have I done to you that you have struck me these 3 times? Then Balaam said to the donkey, Because you have made a mockery of me. If there had been a sword in my hand, I would have killed you by now. The donkey said to Balaam, Am I not your donkey on which you have ridden all your life to this day? Have I ever been accustomed to do so to you? And he said, No. Then Yehovah opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of Yehovah standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, and he bowed all the way to the ground. The angel of Yehovah said to him, Why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I have come out as an adversary, because your way was contrary to me. But the donkey saw me and turned aside from me these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, I would surely have killed you just now, and let her live. Balaam said to the angel of Yehovah, I have sinned, for I did not know that you were standing in the way against me. Now then, if it is displeasing to you, I will turn back. But the angel of Yehovah said to Balaam, Go with the men, but you shall speak only the word which I tell you. So Balaam went along with the leaders of Balak. When Balak heard that Balaam was coming, he went out to meet him at the city of Moab, which is on the border of Arnon, at the extreme end of the border. Then Balak said to Balaam, Did I not urgently send to you to call you? Why did you not come to me? Am I really unable to honor you? So Balaam said to Balak, Behold, I have come now to you. Am I able to speak nothing at all? The word that God puts in my mouth, that I shall speak. And Balaam went with Balak, and they came to Kiriath Chazot. And Balak sacrificed oxen and sheep, and sent some to Balaam and the leaders who were with him. Then it came about in the morning that Balak took Balaam and brought him up to the high places of Baal, and he saw from there a portion of the people. Now, that is quite unusual. I'm sure you have noticed. Now, what I want to point out is a couple of things to you. I know that you have probably seen some Torah portions regarding Balaam and Balak, and everybody has the same questions. The rabbis, the Christians, everybody is a bit confused about what is going on with Balaam here. Some of the questions are: is Balaam a prophet of God? Is he a true prophet? Is he a false prophet? Is he a semi-righteous man who has made some mistakes? These are all, questions that everyone has. And I mean, you look at some of the New Testament writings about Balaam, and that forms your opinion. He definitely is hearing from Yehovah directly. He says, Yehovah is my God. So there's a bit of mystery here surrounding this prophet Balaam. But I want to just back up briefly and say this. You know that the chiefs of Midian and the chiefs of Moab are not friends. These people have fought each other going way back. So they have seemingly formed an alliance against the people of Israel because of the threat that they feel that is posed to them by the children of Israel, which is unusual on its face because we know a couple of things. Number one, Moses spent approximately 40 years with the Midianites when he lived with Zipporah's father, his father-in-law, so he's got to be semi-familiar with them. We know that Yethro, when they came out of Egypt, basically seems to have worshipped God and stayed with them for some time. We also know that the Moabites are actually cousins of the Israelites. In fact, just a couple of chapters previous, God instructed the Israelites saying, don't mess with Moab. I'm not giving you a square foot of their property. And they went to Moab and said, we'd like to pass through your property. And Moab said, absolutely not. And they would not allow them to pass. But Moses and the Israelites were very open with them, very generous, non-threatening. And so the interesting thing is that there's no real threat here. There's actually no real threat from the Israelites to the Midianites or the Moabites at all. God did not tell the Israelites to go and fight with the Midianites or go and fight with the Moabites. They have no interest in fighting with these people. But you notice in verse 3 of chapter 22, it says that Moab was much afraid of the people because they were many, and Moab was distressed. Now you've got afraid and distressed. You check those two words in Hebrew, and you can gain a little bit more insight. These people are experiencing a tremendous amount of fear, and their fear has caused them to act irrationally and to see a mortal threat where there is none, and to behave in a way that is going to actually end up spelling their own doom, because they are acting out of fear and are going to actually end up destroying themselves because of an irrational fear. We've talked about this on many an occasion, where we have to keep our minds straight and we have to make sure to not succumb to fear, because we can end up like these guys, being struck dumb with fear. And there's no joke about that. Anyone, questions, comments so far?
The story of him just scares me to death.
How come, Jimbo?
Because he's obviously talking with God, which, directly, getting direct interaction with your Father, and audibly, and yet he throws his life away.
Yeah, and that's, as I thank you, Jimbo, and that is absolutely right. And, there's a big question about the nature of Balaam, and, what is this, a guy who is an absolute wicked person who was a false prophet and he did not know God at all? It certainly does not seem that way at first. And, what we also see, and we'll come to in just a little bit, some of the New Testament scriptures. It says, for example, in Peter, that the error of Balaam, like Balaam made an error. And frankly, I think that Jimbo is right in the sense that he says, this causes me to have a little bit of concern myself. And I think that's probably part of the whole point. That Balaam did hear from God. He says, Yehovah is my God. And I think that Balaam is and we'll get to this a little bit later, but I think it's safe to say at this point that Balaam's error, if you had to characterize the error of Balaam, what is it? What is his error?
One error would be that the doctrine of Balaam's name kind of reveals his name being not a people,
Mm-hmm.
the doctrine of not a people, and what he did was teach these people how to cause Israel to curse themselves,
Mm-hmm.
because God's people are blessed, and no man can curse what God has blessed unless you teach them how to curse themselves.
Right.
So that's a big error.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, and I think the error was, and that you kind of look at it and you say, well, why did he do that? I mean, is it just because he was evil and that he wanted to cause problems for Israel? I don't think so necessarily. I think that what we see is that Balaam was greedy. Greed controlled him, and I think there are several elements of this story that let us know that Balaam was controlled by greed. That his desire, I think that he was by all accounts that we have of the earliest writings of both rabbis and Christians, it is apparently Balaam was a very well-known seer or prophet who, it's quite fascinating because it says, I know that who you curse is cursed and who you bless is blessed. That is so unusual because it sounds exactly like the promise made to Abraham, where God said, those who bless you I will bless and those who curse you I will curse. So it seems fairly clear that Balaam does have a relationship with God, and yet he is controlled by some amount of greed in that he is willing to sell himself. Did you want to say something, Carl?
Well, I'm kind of puzzled by him because I'm not clear that he was actually of any of the tribes at all, and that yet he did hear God. He was a prophet of God, but maybe an evil prophet, in some regard there. So it's just kind of strange to have somebody who's not walking in those things, hearing from God and getting a message pretty clear from God of what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, here's the thing. A false prophet, when you think about a false prophet is leading the people astray. Now, we don't have any teachings of Balaam aside from, but we can only read between the lines when we hear later on in chapter 31 of this book, and also what happens in the next couple chapters where we find out that Balaam is actually killed. Do we get a little bit more insight into that? But his prophecies, the word that he speaks, that he hears from God, is true. And he speaks the truth that he hears from God. Angela? Go ahead.
I wouldn't call him a false prophet. I'd call him an evil prophet. Because he's not bearing false reports as much as just being evil in the healthy people.
You know what he reminds me of? That's a good point. You know what he reminds me of is Gehazi. Do you remember Gehazi? The administrative sub-prophet, assistant to Elijah? Yeah. That he was seemingly okay, but then he was overcome by greed. And he took advantage of the situation to get some money from Naaman, the Syrian, who was the leper. And so I think there's some connections there. Wayne and Marie, you want to say something?
Yes, I was just saying that whatever we see in this old story is kind of a warning to us, because there are people who hear from God right now, and the word tells us to look at the fruit. So because God doesn't tell us to look at what people are saying, because it seems like he was hearing from God and doing what God told him to do at that point, but obviously his life or his fruits weren't of God. So it's a warning for us right now, because not because you're hearing from God, that doesn't make you a believer, because you're supposed to be checking the fruit. The other thing that I mentioned some time ago, the raven. God
I've
used the
turned off the
raven to give
microphone,
Elijah
so
food.
make sure that you keep a
And
not
the
a dumb
raven
look on
is
your
an
face because the
unclean
people
bird,
on the
but he
camera
was
will
giving
see.
food, which I think bread is, can't tell you the word,
Okay.
you know. Yeah, so I'm saying that not because someone is coming and they can quote scripture to us totally and stuff,
Yeah.
we need to look for fruit. That's basically what I see from that.
Absolutely. That's a really good insight. And I would ask this question. You don't have to answer it. Anybody can, whoever wants to. What is the fruit that you're looking for? What kind of fruit are we looking for?
We look for Galatians. Galatians, right? I think.
Thank
The
you.
fruit of spirit.
Yes. The fruit of the
The
Spirit,
apples,
which is
apples and
what?
pears.
This is love, joy, patience. These things, if they are not characterizing a person, then that person is likely not controlled by the Spirit of God. Because the Spirit of God does bring peace, patience, gentleness, wisdom, those types of things. So watch out for that. Does Balaam exhibit these things? No, he does not. Tracy.
Also, too, when Yahovah it's Isaiah either 11 or 13, I can't remember, when he's talking about how he has this vineyard and he came looking for fruit in that vineyard and instead he found rotten, worthless fruit. And then he clarifies what he was looking for. He was looking for justice, for his judgments, his righteous judgments, and righteousness. So the good fruit he came looking for in that instance was judgment and righteousness. And these are the two things that Abraham is said to have exhibited. He kept Jehovah's Torah and he did justice and righteousness in the earth. And Messiah is the one that's going to come and execute justice and righteousness in the earth. So, I mean, that means a lot of things, but it's basically, God's word, the fruit of his word, being made manifest.
Absolutely. Totally agree. That was an awesome insight. What's that?
I said, mm-hmm.
Oh, she said, mm-hmm. Can you guys hear Angela okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Say something, Angela.
I keep clearing my throat. I'm afraid it's covering up his
No, it's okay.
hi. I'll say plenty later.
Yes, Angela is...
You'll rue the day you said that.
Angela, she's gonna pipe in a couple minutes and
We're
begin
sharing
to share.
tonight.
Yeah,
He's doing first half, I'm doing second.
we're sharing. Yes, absolutely.
Alan?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I thought kind of occurred to me that hasn't occurred to me before. Moses might have been pretty surprised because his father-in-law Jethro was a Gentile priest of Midian.
Mm-hmm.
And here's this other seeming prophet, at least, maybe birds of a feather with Jethro. And here he is causing them all these troubles.
Yeah.
He's getting geared up to really cause them problems.
Yes, absolutely.
Not in this portion.
For generations.
Yeah.
And it might have really thrown Moses for a loop
Mm-hmm.
to see that this guy's teaming up with, Papa Jethro's compadres.
Yep, absolutely.
And he seems to be legit.
He does.
He really interacts with God the way Jethro must have interacted with God.
Yeah.
This is before. Is this before Sinai?
No, this is after for sure.
It's after Sinai, but this is so antiquated. We don't know what God used to do with people before history started getting written. So it could have been a very complicated, priesthood of Melchizedek kind of thing. But was really interacting with people that wanted to interact with him, like Abraham.
Yeah, sure.
And it was a Gentile, first Jew, and it's just, I think that the way God interacts with people is more open than maybe uncomfortable concern.
Sure, I get you. I totally understand. Thank you, Jimbo. I've literally, yeah, you can do that. Angela's going to go kick out a cat, and I'm going to make just a couple of other comments about this introduction section, and then I'm going to let Angela talk for a moment, and then I'm going to go to actually some of the prophecies that Balaam spoke, and just discuss those briefly. What'd you say? Oh, she's discussing those too. There you go. So, I think that you can get a bit of a hint regarding the heart of Balaam when he gets instructions from God, right away when these guys show up, that God in verse 9 came to Balaam and said, "Who are these men with you?" It's just like God appearing to Adam in the garden in the cool of the day. He says, "Where are you?" He's not asking because he needs the answer to that question. He wants you to determine for yourself, where am I? And he is saying to Balaam, why have these men come to you? Probably because these men know that they came, it says in the text, with the rewards in verse 7 of divination. He has a reputation of, and I hate to even say this, but he's one of those people that is like these people you see on television these days who's saying, "Do you have some money for me? I have a word from God for you." He has a reputation of profiting from the words of Yehovah. And these guys know this, and they show up with the money for divination in their hand. And that, I think, is why in verse 9 God says to Balaam, "Why have these men come to you?" Because he's asking Balaam to think about this. Why have these men come to you? Is it because they know that you hear the truth from God? I don't think so. It's because they know they can pay you, and you're likely to say what they want to hear. Now, in this case, it's not working out like that, obviously, because as we'll see in just a little bit, what Balak wants to happen does not happen at all. He does not get the word that he wants. So, remember this also, that God is very clear with him. He says, "You shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed." And notice, that is the definitive word of God that says, you shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people. They are blessed. But what does Balaam say to these men when he goes outside? He says, "Sorry, Yehovah has refused to let me go with you." Did he speak the words of Yehovah? No, he did not. Did he take the side of Yehovah? Was his will and his spirit aligned with Yehovah? No, it was not. If it was, he would have come back to these men and said, "Guys, I got to tell you, I just heard from the Lord. And the Lord said to me, I cannot under any circumstances go with you. And I cannot under any circumstances curse these people. And these people are blessed by the Most High God. And I advise you strongly, stay away from these people. Do not go near them. Do not seek to do them harm. Do not seek to interfere with them at all. In fact, I would advise you to be very kind to them. If you want to receive blessings and you want to be safe, be friendly with them. Help them. Guide them on their journey. Do whatever you can to not get in their way." But Balaam's heart was not aligned with God's at all. He says, "Sorry guys, God refuses to let me go with you." That to me says his heart wants to go with them. but he feels that God is stopping him, and he tells them, sorry, God won't let me go with you. But when they come back with probably more money, more men of prestige, that he says, let me go ask again. Never should have done that. He should have immediately said, what are you doing here? I already had this conversation with you. I can do nothing to help you, period. But he doesn't. He actually leaves the possibility open. Let me go see if God's going to change his mind.
That's like a kid.
That's like
His
a
friends
kid.
come over, ask him if he wants to play, and he says, sorry, Mom and Dad won't let me.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So, Yehovah refuses. This reveals that Balaam's will and God's will is not aligned at all. And he also gives a hint to what is his true heart when he says in verse 19, even for a whole house full of silver and gold, I would not be able to go beyond. Well, I think he's dropping the little hints there. He's saying, maybe if you offer me a whole house full of silver and gold, I might be willing to, I might be able to, maybe we can talk about this. So here's an interesting thing, is that God is willing to permit Balaam to do what is obviously in his own heart. And this is the confusing part for some people when they read this and they say, why did God say, no, don't go, and then changed his mind and said, okay, go, and then got mad as soon as he went and sent an angel to stand in his way? Two things I would bring to your attention. Number one, God will often, as you probably have experienced in your own life, give you your own way periodically. He will tell you, no, don't do it, you'll hurt yourself, and then you say, but, and he says, okay, go ahead. If you need to learn the lesson that way, I am willing to help you. Learn the lesson. You can learn the lesson through wisdom and guidance, or you can learn the lesson through a baseball bat to the head. If you need to learn that way, you can learn that way. And so I think that's what he does. And he says to Balaam, fine, if this is the way you need to learn, then you can learn that way. There's also a second possibility. This is possibility number 2. And that to me draws to mind that psalm that says, to a righteous man, the ways of God are straight and pure. To a wicked man, God seems circuitous and twisty and not right. He'll play that game with the person whose heart is wicked. He himself will seem to be confusing and chaotic, although he is certainly not. He can seem to be to a person whose heart is inconsistent. God himself will seem inconsistent. Absolutely. So that's just a couple of things to think about from that perspective. Side note, when required to take an ethical stand and then relenting and giving in, you destroy your witness and reputation. If he had said, God refused to allow me to go, and I have to follow the will of my God, but then you come back and say, I'm going to go ahead and go with you, destroyed your witness and your reputation.
Maybe Balak got the idea from that he could change God's mind. That's why he did 3 times from 3 different mountains. Because he thought, according to Balaam, this God just may change his mind if I keep asking.
Exactly my point. Did you hear what she said?
Sounds like a little bit capricious.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So he's pestering God to let him have his way, and God is apparently willing to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to pause at this point. Please do, Gerald.
This makes me think of when Satan took Christ up onto at the end of the 40 days, he took him up and he tempted him 3 times.
Right.
Balak tempted Balaam 3 times. The big difference was Christ used the word of God in his own defense. He said, this is what the word says, this is what the word says. Balaam said, how in the world can I get that money in my pocket, fill up my living room with gold?
Yeah.
Like you said, greedy, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yep.
I've got to get that money, man.
Yep.
But I see a coordination between the 3 temptations and the way each one of them handled it.
Yeah, absolutely. Good insight. I'm about to dial it back here and turn it over to Angela for a moment to discuss some of the things that she was looking at. Anybody have any comments or questions regarding what we've talked about so far?
I just wanted to say something too.
Please.
Just about how Yahweh gives you over to. Well, it just goes in with the Second Thessalonians. If you don't receive a love for the truth, he will allow you to believe that delusion, that strong delusion.
Mm-hmm.
And like Ezekiel 20, the first 24 verses are about him saying, I gave them my Torah, I gave them my judgments, and they rebelled against me. They polluted my name. And then, nevertheless, I had mercy on them, and I did this back and forth and back and forth. So finally, verse 25, when he says, therefore I gave them over statutes that were not good and judgments they could not live by. Why? Because that's what they wanted. So he just gave them over to it.
Yes, that's a great insight, and it also reminds me of when they demanded a king and he gave them Shaul. Not a very good king, who turned out to be like a type of the... oh, I'm sorry, I had my microphone off. You might have been able to hear... You might have been able to hear me just a little bit from her microphone, but that reminds me of when the Israelites demanded a king, and God gave them Shaul, who turned out to be not only a bad king, but almost like a shadow picture of the Antichrist. So, you know, that's a
They
good...
did not reject you, they rejected me.
Right.
So it's like, and this is fine. If this is what you want, what you get.
Yep, absolutely. So I'm going to dial it back here, and I'm going to... Does anybody else want to add anything to that?
Are we still talking about a little bit about donkey, or?
We're going to talk about the donkey.
Oh, yeah, Angela's going to talk a little bit about the donkey. John, what happened to your video, buddy?
You know, my video is on, and they even have a light bulb here, but I don't see anyone. I don't even see you, by the way.
Oh, really? Yeah, we don't see you.
There's light and everything, and
That's weird.
I'm lighting up, but I don't know what's going on. It looks like I'm some criminal. Actually, don't feel it.
Well, sorry to hear that, man. I'm going to turn it over to Angela and let her chat with you guys for a minute. Go ahead, Ange.
I want to compare some things, but at first I wanted to explain why I chose these particular things to compare. I want to set some things side by side, and I think a lot of times you can learn something by that. You have one thing and you have a second thing, and then when you put them side by side, you learn a third thing. Now, I know that sometimes when we're reading in the Bible, we run across these little spots that are just puzzling and mysterious, and we don't understand how that fits, and we have all sorts of questions about those spots. But I think that as you compare things and you gain a better understanding of these little tiny bits, these little tiny concepts, it helps open up other things to be understood too, and you start to understand how those fit into the big story, the giant story. So first, I'd like to address the subject of numbers, because this can even be a touchy subject sometimes. I don't think that there are believers that would argue that the number 12, 7, or 40 are not significant numbers, but I think when you start diving into other numbers, they almost get a little turned off by that. But I want us to think about numbers that are included in the Bible as being these type of mile markers along the road. When I take a trip to Colorado, it's a long drive, and the highway, especially across the Indian Reservation, gets very monotonous, and I can lose track of where I am. And every mile there's a mile marker, and what that mile marker does is it helps me place myself back in context. I understand by looking at that how far from the Arizona border I am, and then I remember that, oh yeah, this town was back there and this town is up there, and I have about this much longer to go. So I'd like us to not be too apprehensive about numbers. Remember, they're just to place things in context. Now I wanted to talk about this word for the she-donkey. Atono, I think. Does that sound good? Mm-hmm. Okay. Atono. This term occurs 14 times in this little story here about Balaam. And I want us to look at that number 14 for just a second. Because if we look back in the Bible, and if you think about it for a second, what are some things where the number 14 comes up? Well, one of them is Passover. That's on the 14th day. Purim is also celebrated on the 14th day. And then at the beginning of Matthew, I don't know if you remember that far back in our studies, there's a bunch of 14s when Matthew is giving the genealogy. He gives the genealogy of Yeshua, and then he breaks it into sections of 14. He says, all the generations from Abraham to David are 14, and from David till the Babylonian exile are 14, and from Babylon to Christ are 14. So 3 times it brings up this 14, and we talked about why is it that he does that. We talked about how the name David, if you add up the letters, the Dalet, the Vav, and the Dalet, it equals 14. And Matthew was writing this gospel to portray Yeshua as the king. David is the king. So right here, at the very beginning of the book, when he gives you this genealogy, there's like this little flashing neon sign that's saying king, 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 14, 14, 14. So I want us to kind of keep in mind those 3 things where 14 seems like it's attached. The Passover, when they were brought out of Egypt. Purim, which is a story about the destruction of the enemy. And then 14, the king, his reign. So now let's look at that word atono, that word for she-donkey that happens 14 times. It's from the root, I think, aton or athon, and that root means perpetual, constant, perennial, ever-flowing, like a stream, permanence, enduring. It's translated as strong and mighty most of the time, and then some other words, which is curious, because we're talking about the term for the female donkey is, the root for that term is this thing about perennial, overflowing, enduring permanence. So for a moment, let's just consider that the she-ass, she-donkey, is a possible symbol for perpetual, enduring, ever-flowing stream of blessings. And I'll tell you why I suspect this. I want us to think for a moment of the she-donkey as the carrier for the blessings, or the carrier for the man that will speak the blessings. Remember when Jesus told his disciples, go into the village, you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Now, this is the donkey that he rides into Jerusalem for Passover. Now, it's in Greek, so I don't know if it's a tono, if it's a female donkey, but it says you will find a colt with her. So I'm assuming it's a female donkey. I know there's a lot of back and forth about this donkey and its colt, and was he riding 1 or 2, and some gospel writers say there's 1 and others say there's 2. And I don't want to get distracted by that discussion. I think that sometimes we get hung up on these distractions about questions like that, and we need to maybe just set that aside for a moment, resolve it later, and look at the story.
That Greek word does comport with what you were saying.
Okay, excellent. So let's think of this donkey as our blessing transport vehicle, because what did we have Balaam riding his donkey along and then speaking this blessing. We have Yeshua riding on a donkey. Talk about a blessing right there, speaking a blessing. So, and then if you look at the way the word is spelled, the letters that make up the word for female donkey, you have an aleph, you have a tav, then you have a nun and a vav. And aleph, tav, I think we're all really familiar with what that's a reference to. And then the nun is the letter for fish or life. And then you have vav, which is the symbol or part of the significance of that letter is a man or a tent peg, a joiner. So here we have Aleph, Tav, life, man. This is kind of the perfect combination of letters to describe this vehicle for transporting the blessings, which at Passover during the year 80, 30 something were our Messiah being transported. So now, does anybody want to say anything yet? I'm going to kind of transition to another piece. No.
Can you tell me again, did you say it was 14 times in this chapter or in Numbers?
It's 14 times in this story. I don't know how the chapter is divided up. I think it's Numbers. Now, before this place where we see this word, this clump of this word over and over and over again, there, if you look back in the Torah, there's 4 other places where you find this word. And you have and again, these times that I talked to you where this word is found for she-donkey, which I want you to look at as our blessing vehicle, these 4 other times are all tied to blessing. So the first time you see it is when Abraham has gone down into Egypt. It's right at the start of his story, and he and Sarah go to Egypt, and this is where he tells Pharaoh, she is my sister. And Sarah, his bride, is taken into Pharaoh's house. And it says that Abraham was treated well for her sake, and then it lists all these things that he had, Abraham. And one of the things on the list was a she-donkey. The second time you see this, Jacob is on his way back into the land after being with Laban. He's got his wives and his wealth now. And he sends a whole bunch of gifts ahead of him to his brother Esau before he crosses over into the land. And on the list of these things that he sends to Esau are the she-donkeys. The third time you see this, this is in Egypt. Joseph and his brothers, we've just had that whole thing. He's just revealed himself to his brothers, and now they're going to go back to the land, tell Father that he's alive, and when they're sent back, Joseph sends a bunch of stuff with them. And on the list of stuff that he sends back are she-asses. So in each of these 3 cases, I think we see that there's a transfer of wealth. There's blessings. Because I think a donkey is almost the equivalent of a car nowadays. It's a pretty special thing to have. It'd be a very valuable thing, along with all the other animals that were on the list with this. But when you want to send, you don't send a wire transfer back in whatever year this was. You send, these animals. So in all 3 of these cases, I think we see that. In the first scenario, they go from that blessing, that bunch of animals, goes from Pharaoh, the strong man who has the bride in his house, Tracy, strong man, the strong man who has the bride in his house, those go to the Abraham, the father of many, who has just left the promised land and come down into Egypt because of the famine. The next incident is where these blessings go to Jacob, or Israel, through his experience with Laban, but it's made very clear in that experience that Jehovah is blessing him. So that's really where he got that stuff. And it's when he's coming back into the land. We had Abraham who had just left the land, and now we have Jacob who's coming back into the land, and he's sending ahead this stuff. Now, in the third story, they go from Joseph, who is our messianic figure, right after he has been revealed to his brothers, and they go to his father, who is in the land. Now, his father will then come to him, and there'll be a period of rest. But eventually, after the father has really rested or died, the place where they are, this Egypt, will become the place of constriction. Doesn't Mitzrayim have some association with constriction? Mm-hmm. And an enemy will rise up, and they'll need to be. Jehovah will need to deliver them out of there. And that whole idea of construction or constriction associated with Mitzrayim, there's also this word that's going to be used in the Balaam story of a narrow place. And that word narrow, a lot of times, is translated as enemies, which also is oppressor, constrictor. Those are all kind of in the same family of idea. These enemy, narrow, constriction. And so when we see that type of situation, I think we probably need to think Egypt or enemy. So I just wanted us all to kind of agree before I move on that these first three occurrences of a tono or she-donkey have some association with transfer of wealth or blessings. Anybody want to say anything about that, or maybe you don't feel that way?
I just wanted to confirm the Septuagint uses that same word for she-donkey that Messiah wrote in on. So it is the same word, Greek word.
That's beautiful, yeah.
It's the Greek word 3688, if you want to write that down.
I will.
Awesome.
Greek for she-donkey. Okay. So with all of these different little stories that I've brought up, we have issues with all of these scenarios, and we have sat here and discussed them for probably longer than we should have, but it's sometimes fun to discuss things that don't have an answer. Just like we discussed Balaam, and we have this real this conflict within ourselves of good, bad, what's going on here? Remember Abraham lying about his sister? We had a big discussion about that, lying about Sarah being his sister. We also had a discussion pretty extensive about Jacob stealing the blessing from his brother. Was that right or was that wrong? Was Rebecca wrong to tell him to do that? I mean, we sit here and there's these quandaries that we run into where we just don't understand what's going on here morally, right, wrong, what is this?
Well, if you don't mind my saying so, I think we have to remember sometimes that the Bible is telling us what happened. Mm-hmm. It's not making moral judgments always about why it happened or whether it was right and wrong. It's just telling us what happened.
Yeah. Even with Joseph, the divining cup. Yeah. We got stuck there. Divining? Joseph divining? He's our messianic figure. How can he be using a divining cup? Yeah. And then hiding it in poor Benjamin's sack? I mean, that's just mean. But I don't think we should be surprised that we get conflicted because of what he said. But what I don't want to happen with our discussions is that we kind of get stuck in that rut and miss the deeper thing. So sometimes I think we need to set our moral quandaries aside and look at what happened. Just what happened. Like objective video cameras that don't have to come up with some kind of judgment about who's good and who's bad.
Yeah,
fair?
I agree.
Okay. So that's me saying we don't need to waste our time on apologizing or trying to justify these issues to the minds of men who would question them. Because people will. I'm not going to believe in the Bible because of all the inconsistencies. And say, well, that's beyond convincing you anything about. So we'll just let that be. There's a bigger problem there.
Who wants to talk?
Me. I was just saying that it reminds us of ourselves because we're not perfect, and it's good to see the patriarchs and those people who came before us. Not good, but hey, it shows us that when we get, when we fall or we mess up, they messed up too, and it's only through grace and mercy, through Yeshua, can we see the Father.
Yep.
So I think it's good to see these stories because it helps us. It helps me at least grow and recognize that hey, I still have a chance.
You do.
And that's how you can
tell. It is encouraging.
That's how you can tell that the Bible is true. Because it's
Sure
not
enough.
glossing over things. It's just telling you straight up what is the deal.
Yeah.
It's not,
And then it points to Yeshua being so righteous too. The only perfect,
Yeah.
righteous, sinless,
There's
blameless.
not a whole string of
Lamb.
those.
right.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Very good. Very nice. All right. So we just looked at the first. Did anyone want to say anything? Okay. We just looked at the first 3 occurrences of a tonneau or she-donkey. There's one more before we get to the story about Balaam. And it is found in the blessing that Israel or Jacob gives to the sons. When they're in Egypt, he thinks he's about to die or he was about to die. I don't know. Okay, and he calls them in and he gives them all a blessing. And these blessings are very enigmatic. There's a lot there that we just don't understand. And I want us to just look at the one to Judah. And that's the one where this she-donkey pops up for the 4th time. I think this one might need to be, and I'll explain why I think it needs to be compared. Not just, well, kind of because of the donkey thing, but I think it needs to be compared to what came out of Balaam's mouth. And we will get to what Balaam said, but I want us to look at a couple of these other blessings first and see if there's not some thread woven through them. So, we're going to talk about Balaam's blessings last. We're going to talk about the, what was the one I just said? The one to Judah.
Yes.
From Jacob, the enigmatic one. But there's a third one that I think we need to include. So we're going to put 3 things side by side. I'm sorry, I so wish I had a PowerPoint because this is a lot of stuff to try and tuck in your brain and sort out. I had papers cut up and taped all over the counter today trying to put these things next to each other, and now I got to try and just talk to you about it. So just hang in there.
Tracy should share that text message that she sent that one time about the murder board.
I did not tape it to the wall or do red string. It was on the counter. Does that make it okay?
Yeah, that was pretty fun.
Yeah, I know. It's me. I'm sorry, guys. Okay. And this is the reason why I think we need to pull this third blessing in. There is a story in the Bible that contains a lot of the same elements as what's going on here with Balaam. It says that Balaam got up in the morning, saddled his donkey, took 2 servants. He sees the angel of the Lord along the way, and then after that, he gives a blessing. Did you know there's another story where someone gets up early in the morning, saddles his donkey, takes 2 servants, sees an angel of the Lord during the events, and then receives a blessing? What do you think it is? Anybody? Come on.
The woman going to Elijah? I don't know.
Is it the woman going to see Elijah?
Maybe. There might be another one. No, it's not the one I got.
Abraham's
Thank you. It was my father who said it was Abraham taking
I
his
didn't hear
servant.
it.
Oh no, he was thinking about Abraham's servant going to find a bride.
No, but you're close. It is Abraham.
It was Abraham saddling his donkey and going to bind Isaac.
It's the Akedah, the
It's
binding of Isaac.
The binding of Isaac. Yeah.
Okay, so Abraham takes Isaac up there, and no, I don't think anyone rides the donkey in that one.
I don't think so.
I think there's wood on the donkey.
No, the wood is on the back of the
Isaac.
kid.
That's right. That fits better. But the what was I going to say? Oh, the donkey is not a she donkey in this one. It's a he donkey, I think. I don't remember the word for that, but it's not an atono, but it's still donkey that's got a saddle on it. Why is the saddle on it? Who was riding it? Okay, never mind. These are questions to be answered later. Anyway, after the angel stops him from killing Isaac, well, this is what the angel says. I just wrote down all of the angel's words in the course of the events there. It says, Abraham, Abraham, do not lay your hand on the boy nor touch him. For now I know that you fear Elohim, seeing that you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Ah, that's beautiful. That's Messianic. And just in case you missed it, he's going to repeat it. By myself I have sworn, declares Jehovah, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, that I certainly will bless you. And I shall certainly increase your seed as the stars of heaven and as the sand of the seashore, and let your seed possess the gates of its enemies. There's like a three-parter there. You've got the spiritual stars of heaven, you've got the physical sand of the seashore, and then you have peace. You have possess the gates of your enemies. Destroy? Pretty much. Make them powerless anyway. Okay, so blessings in heaven, blessings on earth, and overcoming an enemy. We're going to see those things pop up when we read Balaam's. All right, now, anybody have anything to say about that one? All right. Who's that?
That's beautiful.
It's Wayne.
It's Wayne Williamson. He's just telling us it's beautiful.
Just wanted to say it's beautiful.
All right, now let's read what Jacob said to Judah when he was laying there blessing all the sons. He said,
Tell them where it's at in case they...
Oh, it's in Genesis 49, verse 8, I think, or so. He said, you, Judah, your brothers praise you. Your hand is on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children bow down before you. Judah is a lion's cub. From the prey you have gone up, my son. He bowed down. He crouched like a lion. He crouched. We have a crouching donkey in our Balaam story. Same word. And like a lion, who does rouse him? The scepter shall not, we know this, don't we?
Turn aside.
The scepter shall not turn aside from Judah, nor an inscriber from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. And to him is the obedience of the peoples. And here it is. Binding his donkey to the vine, and his donkey's colt, and that's where the tonal word is, his donkey's colt to the choice vine. We know who the choice vine is.
It's the Messiah, Yeshua.
He washed his garments in wine and his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine and his teeth whiter than milk. So this is a prophecy about Judah, but, well, he does come from the tribe of Judah.
Preach it, girl.
Seems to fit. So we have the destruction of the enemies. We have a crouching lion. We have a scepter. We have a couple of donkeys. We have a vine. And then we have wine, blood of grapes, crushed grapes kind of thing in this one. Are you guys ready to read Balaam's? Because they're longer. And I'm going to read them to you. Is that okay?
I have
Do you
them.
want to read them?
I can read them, sure. And I have them on the screen here.
That's better.
Yeah. I will read to you the prophecies of Balaam, and I actually have them on my my slides for you, so I'll share that real quick so that you can see it. Okay, there you go. This is Balaam's first discourse. I have skipped over the parts that say, build 7 of these and 7 of those and
So
go
I.
do that. Yeah, so
I just wrote down what Balaam said.
I'm just skipping all that stuff, and I'm just telling you what Balaam actually said. And so this is from chapter 23, starting at verse 7. Balaam's first discourse. It says, from Aram, Balak has brought me, Moab's king, from the mountains of the east. Come, curse Jacob for me, and come, denounce Israel. How shall I curse whom God has not cursed? And how can I denounce whom Yehovah has not denounced? I see him from the top of the rocks, and I look at him from the hills. Behold, a people who dwells apart, and will not be reckoned among the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob, or number the 4th part of Israel? Let me die the death of the upright, and let my end be like his. That's fantastic. Oh, you want me to go ahead?
I'm
you want me
going to talk
go ahead
about
and
that,
read-
but I want to do it in comparison with some other things. That's the thing I'm going to compare.
I see. Okay, so she wants me to read Balaam's second discourse. I have that right here. That starts in chapter 23, verse 18. And Balaam's second discourse says, "Arise, O Balak, and hear. Give ear to me, O son of Zippor. God is not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man, a human being, that he should repent. Has he said, and will he not do it? Or has he spoken, and will he not make it good? Behold, I have received a command to bless. When he has blessed, then I cannot revoke it. He has not observed misfortune in Jacob, nor has he seen trouble in Israel. Yehovah, his God, is with him, and the shout of a king is among them. God brings them out of Egypt. He is for them, like the horns of the wild ox. For there is no omen against Jacob, nor is there any divination against Israel. At the proper time it shall be said to Jacob and to Israel, what God has done. Behold, a people rises like a lioness, and as a lion it lifts itself. It will not lie down until it devours the prey and drinks the blood of the slain."
You going to read the third one?
I will read the third one. Yes, I will. Balaam's third and fourth. You want me to do
just the third.
Just
I don't
the
do
third.
fourth thing.
Uh-oh. Okay. Then Balaam saw that it pleased Yehovah. Sorry, this is starting in chapter 24, right at the beginning. When Balaam saw that it pleased Yehovah to bless Israel, he did not go as at other times to seek omens, but he set his face toward the wilderness. And Balaam lifted up his eyes and saw Israel camping, tribe by tribe. And the Spirit of God came upon him. And he took up his discourse and said, "The oracle of Balaam, the son of Beor, and the oracle of the man whose eye is opened, the oracle of him who hears the words of God, who sees the vision of the Almighty, falling down, yet having his eyes uncovered. How fair are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel, like valleys that stretch out, like gardens beside the river, like aloes planted by Yehovah, like cedars beside the waters. Water will flow from his buckets, and his seed will be by many waters. And his king shall be higher than Agag, and his kingdom shall be exalted. God brings him out of Egypt. He is for him like the horns of the wild ox. He will devour the nations who are his adversaries, and he will crush their bones in pieces and shatter them with his arrows. He crouches, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion who dares rouse him? Blessed is everyone who blesses you, and cursed is everyone who curses you."
Okay. Is this the right way?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we're back. You know, throughout the years, we've addressed this like biblical principle that seems to repeat itself over and over again, and that is that you divide and then put back together, and then it equals multiplication. Like the most simple example of that is when he divides man into man and woman. You put those back together, and you get kids. And we see that happening all over the place. It's almost like this law of biblical physics. Can we use that idea? Okay. So it's just one of the ways that Yehovah works. So I want to, let's see, what do I want to do? I want to compare now. With that in mind, that you take things apart, put them back together, and you end up with a myriad. I want to compare these three sets of things. You have the first 3 times she-donkey occurs in the Bible, the atono word that we just talked about. You have the 3 scenarios with Balaam and his donkey. along the road when he's getting there. And then you have these 3 blessings that Balaam just spoke. And I want to take the first she-donkey, the first blessing Balaam spoke, and the first incident with the donkey, and I want to put those next to each other. And then I want to take the next set, the second of each of those, and put those next to each other. And then the third, put those next to each other. And there might be a few things there. I think much more time probably needs to be spent on this, or there might be nothing there. It's fine. That's fine. I'm just seeing a couple things that, I don't know, may or may not be there. So for this first set of 3, I want you to think about the separation. That's the kind of the first step in that process of restoration. Separation, then we bring back together in them. But first we have to separate.
You need a drink?
Yeah. So here are the 3, in case you don't remember them off the top of your head. Okay, we have the first time we see a tonal is the list of things that Abraham has when Sarah is in Pharaoh's house. And if you look at this with that idea of separation, you see you see that Abraham has been separated from the promised land. He's down in Egypt. And you see that while in Egypt, he has been separated from his bride. Then if you look at the second little incident with the donkey, you had the angel with the sword standing as an adversary to Balaam and his donkey and his 2 servants. And what the donkey does this time is he turns aside out of the way, or the derech, into a field. So I think you have the separation of Balaam from what he had something he wanted to do. And this donkey is just not cooperating with what he needs to get done. He's been separated from his agenda. And then when you look at the first blessing that Balaam speaks, you have he starts it out by saying, Balak, the sovereign of Moab, has brought me from Aram. So even Balaam has been separated from his home here. And then during this blessing, he says, look, a people dwelling alone, apart, reckoning itself not among the nations. So we have our set-apart people, not among the nations. And then at the end of this, he says, let me die the death of the upright. Let my end be like his. That to me, it echoes that idea of partaking in Messiah's death with him, because he is the upright. And we share in that with him. And so some of the things that this guy is saying are just absolutely beautiful. I know he's getting them from Jehovah, but at least his mouth got to utter the words. So that's the ultimate separation, is death. The breath separated from the body, spirit separated from the body. So we have Balaam separated from his home, this people that have been separated from the nations. We have a reference to the dust of Jacob being beyond counting, and that ultimate separation, death. That was the first set. Is that all right with me? The second set is a little bit weirder. I wish I could have spent more time on it. But there's this idea that Israel is not crushed. He's accepted. You have in the first atono occurrence, you have that's the story about Jacob coming back and giving the stuff to Esau as he enters in the land, and of course they're reunited. They had been separated by that blessing fiasco. So I wanted you to remember this thing with Jacob and Esau. You remember how Jacob was grabbing Esau by the heel when they were born? So they were born connected, and then there was this separation. And then here, when he sends these gifts ahead of him, the ultimate reunion, they're reunited. And also remember how upset Esau was when Jacob did that. And he found out that Jacob had got the blessings from his dad. And remember, Israel, or Jacob, said, I can't undo that. That's done. Once it was spoken, there was no reversing it, which is, we're going to see in this prophecy, the second prophecy that Balaam talks about,
he says, he has blessed and I do not reverse. So there's no taking this back. This is going to happen. If he has said it, he will do it. And when he looks upon, he says, I do not look upon wickedness in Jacob, nor have I seen trouble in Israel. Well, again, if we look back with our kind of moral glasses on, we can say, well, there was all sorts of problems there. But I think that after redemption, that's not what he sees. When he sees his people complete and without blemish after this redemption. So what in the world does this second incident of Balaam have to do with this? This is where he's walking in a path through a vineyard. So there's vineyard on either side, and there's walls, and the donkey squishes his foot up against a wall. Well, in this, the rider on the donkey is the one who gets crushed or squished. Crushed, squished, pressed, those are all words for what happens to his foot there. So it's not Israel who gets this. It's the rider on the donkey here that's going in the middle of the vineyard. And remember in Genesis when it talks about how the serpent would crush the heel of the seed? And we know that's a picture of the death of Messiah. And we know that it's that death that brought resurrection and restoration and took our blemishes away so that he sees no wrong in us and restored our connection with God. And he's still working to bring back the separated pieces. I think it's poetic that we see a foot being crushed here. It's not the same word for foot. Heel and foot are two different words. I'm dealing with just the idea of that body part and injury being done with it in between, in the vineyard, against a wall. So, and the idea that it was the rider on the donkey that suffered that injury, and that our other rider on a donkey into Jerusalem on Passover suffered an injury that was one of the pictures of
that prophecy.
It was a picturesque language for talking about that particular injury. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so on our third set of three, we have, I want you to think revelation and return and rest and vanquishing the enemy. So in this one, Joseph, in our first atono, Joseph was revealed to his brothers in Egypt, and it was also revealed to his father that he was still alive. And this isn't the end of the story. There's going to be problems later on, but you'll see with all three of these examples I'm about to give, there's some trouble up ahead in all three cases. In this one, you're going to have the issue with Egypt and the plagues, but there's still some problems coming there. So in the donkey story, in the last little incident, you have a narrow place. And remember, narrow, constriction, enemies. And in this one, the donkey just sits down. It just lays down. Kind of like the crouching lion in Judah's blessing, just lays down. And after this, Balaam sees. He sees the angel. Of course, that's not the last of his troubles. We're going to read about him in Numbers 31. There's going to be some issues coming up. And of course, then he's going to get killed. Okay, so that's not going to go well later on either. Then the last time Balaam speaks a blessing, he's going to speak again, but it's not necessarily a blessing. This is his third blessing. He calls himself, now this is the first time he's addressed himself in his oratorical, his presentation. The other two times he's said, Balak sent me, or Balak, whatever. This time he says, this is a saying of Balaam, and he son of Beor, that's him. And he says, the man whose eyes are opened, who hears the words of El. And again, he addresses himself as the man with the eyes opened. So you have revealing. You have Joseph is revealed to his brothers. You have the angel with the sword being revealed to Balaam. And you have Balaam now, whose eyes are opened, saying, talking about the rain. He talks about the lion that's laying down. and the one who blesses you, and cursed is the one who curses you. So, and of course, then after that, he's going to have one more thing to say, which is not that great. It's kind of doom and gloom, his fourth saying. So in all three of these instances, there's something icky on the other side of them. But this whole thing with Balaam and his donkey, on Balaam's journey, he's been beating this donkey, probably thinking that it's preventing him from attaining his blessing. It's his riches, because that's what he sees as his blessing. And he has a place to go and things to do, and this donkey is not being cooperative. And I am guilty of being Balaam so much. I have my agenda, and I'm riding on my blessings down my path, and they sometimes are not very cooperative. And I think what I need to do is stop and realize that these blessings, so they sometimes don't look good, but they're keeping me out of harm's way. And I need to trust that, because there's just things I can't see. I can't see that angel with the sword. Notice that the donkey, when Balaam beat him after the third time, the donkey speaks, but he doesn't say anything. He doesn't argue with Balaam and tell him how he's wrong to do that. He doesn't try to justify himself and say, well, there was this guy with a sword and I was just trying to take care of you. He doesn't say that. He just asks questions. He says, what have I done to you? And Balaam says, well, you mocked me. And he said, you've known me for a very long time. Have I ever done that? So he only asks questions, and Balaam is starting to realize, and Balaam says no. And then Balaam sees what the danger was. And then Balaam gets very cooperative, because from here on out, Balaam seems to do exactly what he's supposed to. And maybe that was the point of these three incidents with the donkey. It was like, go ahead, Balaam, go on your way, and on your journey, I'm going to give you a little education that's going to change your heart, because it does seem like his heart was changed at that point. Maybe. I don't know. If you want to think Balaam's just bad 100%, there's nothing good there, whatever. I don't know what to think about this. So then he gives his fourth proclamation of doom. Did you want to? He says, want me to read it, or do you want to?
The final.
Have I taken too? I'm taking too long.
You're okay.
Anyway, okay. He says this is what's going to happen to your people in the latter days, and there's talk of. He's the one with his eyes open, and he says, I see him, but not now. I observe him, but not near. This is in the future, and I know who this him is. He says, a star shall come out of Jacob, a scepter shall rise out of Israel. Okay? And out of Jacob one shall rule and destroy the remnant from Ar. And I'm abbreviating because I'm trying to hurry. And then he says some real bad things about the Amalekites and the Kenites, which are probably very relevant, but we're going to hurry. I just wanted to go back to the 14 one more time, that number, and the Passover, Purim, and the reigning king, David, that thing. When he is listing those 14 generations in Matthew, I think this is always giving us this overall big picture. It's like there are these outlines everywhere, these templates for the big picture of restoration and how it's going to happen, how he's going to rejoin us to him. When he's talking about those generations, he says 14 generations from Abraham, the father, to David, the king, 14 generations from David, the king, to the Babylonian exile, and then 14 generations from the exile to the Christ. That is half the menorah, because flip it. And that's what we've been living through. Okay, you had it go this way to the Christ. Now let's leave the Christ in the middle and continue, but reverse it. We're going from the Christ back into an exile, a really long one, 2,000 years and counting. Then from this exile to our King's return, and that's Yeshua. And then finally, when all things are handed back to the Father. That's it.
That is a fantastic picture.
I like menorahs.
You like menorahs?
I like it when things pivot.
They do.
Yeah.
That was nicely done. Ladies and gentlemen, do you have? I'm going to cover just a couple of real quick things here, but I just wanted to say, if that was a little deep from Angela, as you would expect. Thank you for that. Do you have comments or questions regarding what she has shared here? Perhaps I can get her to actually put this together in some type of a little PowerPoint form so that I can embed it in the video that I will then upload for people, so that you'll be able to see a little bit more clearly the patterns that she's laying out. She was, working like mad today to kind of put these ideas together for you. But hold on to that, and we'll see if we can do something with it. Go ahead, Carla.
I think Mike might be first.
You think Mike is first?
Yeah.
What do you got? What you pointed out, that if you could have a picture or a slide, ordering that out.
Yeah, and even if she just puts it on one slide that I can integrate, that would certainly help. Okay, go ahead, Carla. I apologize.
I'm just the same thing. It would be helpful to visual. I'm a more visual person to be helpful to
Absolutely.
But yeah, I just it's amazing the unique insights that the Lord gives each one of us, and I appreciate what Angela presented, because it was a way of looking at the threads of, and it's like the tapestry of the scriptures in a way that I had not seen before. And I love it what the Lord does in the gifts of all of us here, in bringing those insights and the depth of, gosh, there's just so much meaning to everything. And it blesses me to hear what the Lord is giving to each person that contributes so much, because it's just wildly different, but it's just so amazing what he does.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. I agree, and I think whenever Angela and I can kind of work together, you guys know me. I'm a fairly pedestrian kind of guy who's like got this. This is just what it says, and I'm going to try to help you understand just what it says. But then she'll go and like weave these threads through it and go, "Did you notice that?" I'm like, "No, I did not notice that. I notice it now that you're bringing it up because that's fascinating." But it's a different gift, I think, that God has for each person. She loves to put together puzzles. I hate puzzles. I hate, things that you have to try to figure out. Chess. I don't play chess. I don't think like that. I'm really more of a literalist. But you know what? God be praised. There's a place for me in my pedestrian walking along here. No, it is fairly pedestrian, but I really appreciate being able to work with Angela where she's able to see some of those larger threads and say, if you look at the trees, at the forest instead of just the trees, so she helps me in that way. Tracy?
Well, that's the whole purpose and function of the body, and that we're not all thumbs, and we're not all
right.
the same, we're all different for a reason.
Right.
And I wonder about the parable of the talents, when the slothful servant gets punished for not doing anything with what he was given, and he says, "You should have at least given it to the bankers. I could have got some interest back." And to me, I was like, well, maybe that's what we're doing. You should have at least given what I gave you to someone within the body, because maybe they would have done something with it.
Good. That's a good point. I like that. It's also probably a good, just a little bit of insight into just being married in general. She's got something I don't have, and we tend to.
We should work together.
We should work together more often. I really appreciate it. But it took me. I had to practically beat her in order to get her on the camera.
See, he says pedestrian, but he gets it done every single week. And I go in these spurts.
Well, there's something to be said about that.
I'll go all
yes.
day, and no one gets fed. No one got fed today. And then now I might not even do anything for a long time.
And that's okay.
All right.
That's okay.
But thank you for being consistent.
But I appreciate your willingness to help out. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up, you guys. I just want to read you one little thing here, and we'll talk more about this next time. Oh, I apologize. I want to share this screen with you for just a second, just for these last couple of little slides. We have the incident at Baal Peor. So right at the beginning of chapter 25 is the last little section of this Torah portion. And I just want to read that to you because this becomes really important, and we'll dig apart in this section. We'll dig down deeper into this section next week. But it says that while Israel remained at Shittim, the people began to play the harlot with the daughters of Moab, for they invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel joined themselves to Baal of Peor. And Yehovah was angry against Israel. And Yehovah said to Moshe, take all the leaders of the people and execute them in broad daylight before Yehovah, so that the fierce anger of Yehovah may turn away from Israel. So Moshe said to the judges of Israel, each of you slay his men who have joined themselves to Baal of Peor. Then behold, one of the sons of Israel came and brought to his relatives a Midianite woman in the sight of Moses and in the sight of all the congregation of the sons of Israel while they were weeping at the doorway of the tent of meeting. And when Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, saw it, he arose from the midst of the congregation and took a spear in his hand, and he went after the man of Israel into the tent and pierced both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman, through the body. So the plague on the sons of Israel was checked, and those who died by the plague were 24,000. So that is the incident of Baal Peor, and I think that that's a very profound thing, and there's a lot of stuff there, and it's going to continue on a little bit more talking about Phinehas and the blessing of him, and we'll talk about that next time. But I also wanted to just, bring to your attention that, look up, for example, in the Greek writings of the New Testament, look up 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 13. About halfway through verse 13, talks about Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness. And then you could also look at the book of the Revelation of the Messiah, chapter 2, verse 14. Isn't that interesting that 2 Peter 13 into 14 and also Revelation 2, 14? I have a few things against you because you have there some who hold the teaching of Balaam, who kept teaching Balak to put a stumbling block before the sons of Israel, to eat things sacrificed to idols, and to commit acts of immorality. You know that this revelation of the Messiah Yeshua in chapter 2, where it's talking about the 7 letters to the 7 churches, you know that this thing about Balaam basically teaching the sons of Moab to put this stumbling block before the sons of Israel, that's in the Talmud. That's not in your Torah. The only place you're going to get the details which Yeshua is actually talking about there in the book of the Revelation is in the Talmud. The Talmud will tell you about how Balak and Balaam concocted a plan to cause the children of Israel to stumble regarding these women who were, and we'll talk about that next time, but it's quite fascinating. Tracy?
Just noticed something in that last reading in chapter 25 about how they were joined to the gods or whatever it said there. And Israel was joined to Baal Peor, and Yehovah burned against them. And this is the doctrine of Balaam that we're talking about, which is the doctrine of not a people, which teaches God's people how to curse themselves by not obeying God. Because he has no authority to curse you, just as Satan had no authority to curse you in the garden. And that is the doctrine of Balaam back in the garden, teaching Adam and Eve how to curse themselves because he couldn't do it. He had to cause them to do it.
Yeah.
And what all this is joining yourselves, not with the body of Messiah, for the two shall be one flesh, but with the body of a harlot. And this is what Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 6:15 and 16. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Messiah? Then shall I take the members of Messiah and make them members of a whore? Let it not be. Or do you not know that he who is joined to a harlot is one body with her? For he says, the two shall become one flesh.
Yep.
So this is the doctrine of Balaam. This is Satan's MO from the beginning, from the garden, is teaching us how to leave the way of righteousness on our own accord.
That is the best plan ever. It seems to work like a champ, and it is still the plan today. And we've been talking about this several times as we studied through the book of Leviticus, where it kept telling us, here is how you maintain the holiness that I have given you. Here is how you behave so that you maintain the holiness that I have bestowed upon you. You can only curse yourself by behaving in a certain way. Remember that you cannot make yourself holy. It is not about you trying to be holy. Although the text does say in several occasions, be holy for I am holy, what it means is stop defiling yourselves. And this is how you do it. You join yourself to Baal Peor. And it's exactly taken us back to Acts chapter 15. Again, with fornication, with idolatry, with eating meat sacrificed to idols, with blood. These are the things that we keep defiling ourselves with. And we're going to see all of these things combined in the incident of Baal Peor. It's disgusting, and it's really disturbing, and yet it seems to keep happening over and over and over and over. It's a beautiful, beautiful trick that the adversary plays, and it works like a champ every time. You really have to guard yourself, and you really have to stand firm on the words of God and determined that you are not going to defile yourself. Putting aside your flesh, your fleshly desires. And that's it, folks. That's really the key to this thing. Do not defile yourselves. I thank you, Angela.
Thank you.
You beautiful woman. Thank you for joining me, you guys. I